Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And friends, thank you for joining us on Crosstalk today here on VCY America. In light of the circumstances that unfolded Saturday night with yet another assassination attempt on President Trump, we have changed our plan topic for today, and to really further address this matter and looking at history past as well. But as far as this Saturday, the location was the Hilton Hotel in Washington, D.C. This was the same hotel where an assassination attempt had been made on former President Ronald Reagan. So at the Hilton this past Saturday was the White House Correspondents' Dinner. President Trump was there with his wife. So also was the Vice President, J.D. Vance, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, FBI Director Kash Patel, other cabinet, White House staff. Approximately 2,600 were in attendance. And it was at approximately 8:35 p.m. Eastern Time that shots were fired as an individual identified as Cole Thomas Allen charged through security in an attempt to gain access to the ballroom, but thankfully was stopped. And now, just a short while ago, the accused has been in court, charged with an assassination attempt against the President of the United States. President Trump spoke to the media afterwards in a late-night press conference and said, as a nation, we need to recommit to resolving our differences peacefully. Here's what he said.
So as you know, this is not the first time in the past couple of years that our republic has been attacked by a would-be assassin who sought to kill. In Butler, Pennsylvania, less than 2 years ago, you all know that story, and in Palm Beach, Florida, a few months after that, we came close. We really had, again, we had some great work done by law enforcement. But in light of this evening's events, I ask that all Americans recommit with their hearts in resolving our difference peacefully. We have to resolve our differences. I will say, you had Republicans, Democrats, independents, conservatives, liberals, and progressives. Those words are interchangeable, perhaps, but maybe they're not. But yet everybody in that room, big crowd, record-setting crowd. There was a record-setting group of people. And there was a tremendous amount of love and coming together. I watched, and I was very, very impressed.
Joining us today to discuss this, we have William J. Federer. He is a nationally known speaker, historian, author, president of AmeriSearch, a speaker on the American Minute daily broadcast. He's authored numerous books like America's God and Country, Encyclopedia of Quotations, Who is the King in America?, Socialism, The Real History from Plato to Present, and Silence Equals Consent, The Sin of Omission, multiple other titles as well. Bill, thanks for joining us here on Crosstalk.
Well, it's great to be with you, Jim.
So, Bill, there's a growing list of incidents targeting President Trump right now. USA Today had just laid out several of these. March 12, 2016, a man charged the stage at a campaign event then candidate Trump was speaking at in Dayton, Ohio. A few months later, June 18th, 2016, while campaigning, there was a British man attempting to grab a police officer's firearm at a rally in Vegas, and then candidate Trump was speaking. Authorities said the suspect later admitted he intended to kill Trump. July 13th, 2024, this being the most serious attack, Butler, Pennsylvania. Gunman opened fire toward the stage just as President Trump turned his head. This bullet grazed his ear, bloodied him. Spectator was killed. This was an assassination attempt. September 24, we have the incident taking place at his golf club in West Palm Beach, Florida. And now, April 25, 2026, at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in Washington, D.C., Bill, this is all so very troubling.
Well, it is, and we need to pray for President Trump and that God protect him. And we've had lots of assassination attempts, and for presidents actually assassinated over the years. And this is, you have Lincoln and Garfield and McKinley and John F. Kennedy, and one of the attempted assassinations on Andrew Jackson, 1835. He was returning to the White House after a funeral. Richard Lawrence, a unemployed person, attempted to shoot Andrew Jackson, and both of his pistols did not go off. And they think it's because of the humidity. It's sort of foggy up there in the D.C. area at times. Later, both those pistols were fired with no problem. And so this was considered by many as a miracle. And even the King of England sent Andrew Jackson a condolence and thanking God. One of the ones with Garfield, there was the Oneida community in New York. It was utopian, free love community where every man slept with every woman. I mean, it was like this bizarre place. Sort of interesting. The kids that grew up there said, "Can we go back to having one spouse for life?" I mean, it was like so chaotic. But the guy's name was Charles Guiteau, Guiteau, and so he was from this free love community, and he decided he was going to assassinate James Garfield, who was a godly man. He was a Civil War general, and he also, taught a Sunday school class and so forth. But you have these assassination attempts. A lot of them people don't know about. You have many attempts, like on Taft. William Howard Taft was in El Paso, Texas, in 1909 to meet with the Mexican president, and a gunman named Julius Bergeson was apprehended with a pistol. And then Theodore Roosevelt, after he was president, a saloon keeper named John Schrank shot Theodore Roosevelt, who was running for president, in the chest, breaking one of his ribs. Had it not been for his glasses case, which was metal, which slowed down the bullet. And in classic Theodore Roosevelt style, he was shot, bent over, then stood back up, and he finished his speech.
Wow.
Only Teddy Roosevelt can do that. Herbert Hoover had an Argentinian anarchist wanting to blow up a train that Herbert Hoover was on going through the Andes Mountains, but that was stopped in 1928. Franklin Roosevelt had lots of assassination attempts. The first was in Chicago. A gunman, Giuseppe Zangara, fired 5 shots at Roosevelt, hitting Chicago Mayor Anton Kermark, who died. Soviet officials claimed to have thwarted a Nazi plot to assassinate FDR. And then Truman, a Puerto Rican nationalist, Griselio Torresola and Oscar Collazo broke into the Blair House where Truman spent his second term, and Torresola was killed by a Secret Service agent. And then Nixon, Arthur Bremer, made 2 attempts to ambush Nixon in Ottawa, Canada, but was unable to line up the shot, and he was apprehended. So you see these different cases. The problem is that they're usually stirred up by the media. And so the media is complicit in this.
How do you mean stirring up by the media?
Vilifying the person to the extent where some people, France was interesting. Louis the 16th was very tolerant. He wanted to be a benevolent monarch, and he was granting these freedoms. And people would write things about Louis the 16th. He helped us during our revolution, but all he got in return was debt. And then there was a couple of years where the crops failed, and the people didn't have bread. And, of course, the Queen Marie Antoinette was just in her 20s, but she said, well, let the people eat cake. She didn't realize that they didn't have a choice, right? Poor girl. Anyway, the people took advantage of the freedoms that he granted to publish articles against the king and to speak out publicly against the king. And he was being this benevolent monarch saying, okay, I'm going to let him speak out. I won't be like your typical czar in Russia where I'll arrest them and chop their heads off. And so as a result, all these people speaking out, you had people believing that he was at fault, and they had their riots in Paris, and they decided to chop off his head, and with the guillotine and so forth, and so a certain amount of people can read articles that are critical and say, well, let's just have an intellectual debate. But other people are sort of easily persuaded, and oftentimes now they're finding out that a fair amount of them are on drugs, psychotropic drugs, which is mind-altering, sort of like a date rape drug, where the person is semi-conscious. They feel like they're in a dream, but they're highly open to suggestion. And so a lot of these, trans killers of, at schools and so forth, they found out that, the person was on some really powerful mind-altering drugs that make them open to suggestion.
Yeah. And matter of fact,
we don't know about this case, because this just happened.
Right. But there's a manifesto we know that was come out, and that's what I find interesting too, Bill, is the fact that this manifesto, he signed it, Cold Force Friendly Federal Assassin Allen, and he is the one that is accused of firing at this dinner. And had released this manifesto to his close family members just minutes before the shooting. Former President Obama said the motive was unclear, but Bill, the manifesto reveals otherwise. I mean, one of the lines in the manifesto says, "I experience rage thinking about everything this administration has done."
Yeah, and it's the media that stirs that up. I don't know if you've seen some of the videos where it'll have one person saying, if you forward on a video without checking it, this is very dangerous to democracy. And then you have another TV host saying word for word the same thing, and then another, and there's 100 of them all saying the exact same thing. This is very dangerous to democracy. And it's like, what's really dangerous is all these news people simply reading from somebody's script.
Right.
It's like, who's writing the script? And then there's a compiled clip, I think, by the Media Research Center, when J.D. Vance was being chosen to be the vice president. And within 1 week, you have all these media saying that J.D. Vance was weird. He's just weird. He's weird. What a weird... and then when you have the Democrat convention, they all say it's electric. The convention was electric. There was an electricity in the air. So wasn't it electric? And,
right.
And then when Trump had the president of South Africa in his office, and he was asking him pointed questions about the Christians being killed, and the news media said President Trump ambushed the South African president. Another ambush by the president. The president ambushed him, and they're all using the word ambush. I mean, it's like all of these major news media are all getting their talking points from one source. And you think that they're all different, but they're not. And so somebody has a political agenda, and they know if they can seed the public with negative things, that some people are going to take it into their own hands and do an assassination attempt. And then they'll be able to stand back and say, well, we didn't do it, but yet they were providing the intellectual motivation.
We're going to take a quick break here. William J. Fitterer is our guest today. Another assassination attempted here this past weekend. We'll have more comments after the break. This is Crosstalk on the VCY American Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and creation researcher with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, are animals more and more intelligent as they march up the evolutionary tree?
Chris, let's get this straight. Evolution did not happen. There is no valid evolutionary tree. There are no higher animals. It stands to reason in evolution that the apes would be the most intelligent of the animals, only bested by mankind. While it is true that apes have a larger brain than do, say, toads, there are a lot of animals thought to be lower on the evolutionary tree which are quite intelligent. A number of insects can do things that would astound you. Now even a fish has been discovered that can use tools in digging its burrow. Chris, there is no hierarchy of the animals leading to man. Each of the animals were created separately after their kind, each with unique abilities. Chris, it makes so much sense when you go back to Genesis for your starting point.
You can find us on the web at www.icr.org.
William J. Federer, our guest today on Crosstalk, his website AmericanMinute.com, and talking about yet another assassination attempted this past Saturday. A matter of fact, there was a late-night press conference held Saturday night at the White House. President Trump and Kash Patel and others spoke at this event, the acting Attorney General as well. And there was a question from Peter Doocy of Fox News. I'm going to play that question, his response, and we'll have our guest Bill Federer comment after that. Right now, this is from that press conference this past Saturday night.
I ask respectfully, why do you think this keeps happening to you?
Well, you know, I've studied assassinations, and I must tell you, the most impactful people, the people that do the most, you take a look at the people, Abraham Lincoln, I mean, you go through the people that have gone through this, where they got them, but the people that do the most, the people that make the biggest impact, they're the ones that they go after. They don't go after the ones that don't do much because they like it that way. And when you look at the people that have either, whether it was an attempt or a successful attempt, they're very impactful people.
Bill, impactful people is what the president had said. Your comments, sir.
Yeah, well, Ronald Reagan was one who was taking on the establishment, taking on the globalists, and then shortly after he got elected, actually he was 69 years old when he got elected president, and on his 69th day in office, it's an easy way to remember it, it was John Hinckley Jr. that fired 6 shots at President Ronald Reagan outside the Washington Hilton Hotel, very same hotel, wounding President Reagan, 2 Secret Service officers, and a White House press secretary, James Brady. Reagan was rushed to the George Washington University Hospital. Little personal trivia, my daughter went to college at George Washington University, and she worked a side job in the emergency room and on the ambulances there for the hospital. And then when they built the new hospital and they were moving all the patients out of the old hospital, the emergency room staff sort of had a little goodbye to the old emergency room, and they had all the staff in there, and so my daughter took us in, and they took us into the one emergency room with a steel table and these old CRT, computer big monitor things like hanging on these swivel things from the ceilings. It was pretty crude, but they said this is where Ronald Reagan laid, where they operated on him. And they said that it was a very small little cut, almost unseen, right under a rib, and yet it was a piece of metal that almost got to his heart. If it had been a microscopic little bit over, it would have hit the heart and he would have bled to death, but they were able to remove it, which makes some of the thoughts questionable, because, when the shots went off, a Secret Service agent jumped on top of Reagan, and they were like, well, gee, anyway, that's a whole different line of examining.
It's also interesting. I mean, James Brady was shot, and here the briefing that was held the other night was in the James Brady room there at the White House, the briefing room, and consequential individuals. Look at John F. Kennedy, 1963. Yeah.
Some rather ones that get passed over is Gerald Ford. There was the alphabet bomber, Muharrem Kerbachovic. He was threatening to throw a nerve gas bomb at him. Lynette Fromm, a disciple of Charles Mason, took a pistol to shoot at Ford at the Capitol in Sacramento, California, but the gun didn't go off. And then a Symbionese Liberation Army sympathizer, Sarah Jane Moore, fired at Ford, missed him, but wounded the taxi driver. So that was Gerald Ford. You had, supposedly George H.W. Bush in April of '93. Kuwaiti authorities arrested 17 men who were allegedly plotting to kill him with a truck bomb. And then there's others. But this is a pattern that unfortunately takes place in countries. They tried assassinating Pope John Paul II, and he later went into the prison and forgave the Muslim attempted assassin person.
Bill.
As a matter of fact, it's interesting. The word assassin. You know where that came from? It came from Muslims in the mountains of Iran in the 1200s. And the leader would get these Muslim young men high on hashish and take them to a harem, and they'd have a good time, and then they'd pass out, and then they'd take them back to where they were kidnapped. And they said, you just went to paradise. And if you die while you're sneaking into this Mongolian camp and killing a Mongolian leader, Hulagu Khan or whoever, and then they kill you, you'll go back to this party. And so they were called Hashashins because of the Muslims who would smoke hashish.
Wow.
They called them Hashashins. And so this was a terror that they would sneak into the enemy camp and stab the enemy leader and then stand there waiting to die because they thought it was their ticket back to that harem party. And just an interesting
that is interesting
etymology of that word.
Hey, Bill, let me also bring up this issue as well. I mean, this is just days before this dinner. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel airing this parody. I'm going to play the statement that he gave, but it's very inappropriate. And you talk about stirring people up, getting people to think on certain things. Here's what Jimmy Kimmel had to say.
Our First Lady Melania is here. Look at Melania, so beautiful. Mrs. Trump, you have a glow like an expectant widow.
A glow like an expectant widow. Bill, that's outrageous.
Yeah, evil. But that's the type of rhetoric that goes into people's minds.
Yeah.
The word for citizen in ancient Greece is polites. Polites. Pol means city, like Indianapolis, Minneapolis, Annapolis, Maryland. Polis means city, and pol means a citizen of the city, polites. And it's spelt like polite with an S because the politeness was how the citizens were supposed to treat each other. And so in a civilized community, for it to work, there needs to be mutual respect. And so these were rules of civilized society.
Let me play another clip here and have you further comment. This is, and I just played this about a week ago on Crosstalk, or several days ago. Representative Bonnie Watson Coleman was speaking in a hearing, and she talked and she used the words about eliminating Trump. But I'd like to just refresh our minds with what she had to say.
Because if we wanted to eliminate abuse and fraud, we'd eliminate the President of the United States from the office right now and the rest of the sycophants in his administration that are allowing him to do so many illegal things.
Bill, this is not the first time we've heard rhetoric like that as far as eliminating the president, eliminating Donald Trump.
Yeah, what they're doing is projection. And this is a typical psychological warfare tactic where you blame your opponent for what you're guilty of. So these are people who are guilty of what they're accusing Trump of doing. I was reading a 1960s Military Review magazine, and it talked about the Soviet psychological tactics where they would blame another country for what they're doing. and it said that every one of us have heard children say, "I didn't start the fight, you did." And this magazine goes on to say, whoever makes the accusation first has the advantage, because most people will just go with the headlines.
Yeah.
And then it puts the good person on the defensive. And every time the good person denies the accusation, in the public's mind, they just do word association. They see, crime and fraud, and then this person's name. Crime and fraud, and then this person, and they make a connection. And a cheating spouse will always accuse the faithful spouse of being unfaithful.
Wow.
It's in the Bible. Potiphar's wife accused Joseph of lusting after her when she was lusting after him.
Yep.
The Apostle Paul is in Jerusalem, shaved his head, he's fasting, he's in the temple praying, and the Pharisees see him and stir up a riot, and they're pulling him apart. And the Romans rescue Paul, and he's about to get, whipped, and then he has to go to a trial. And Tertullus shows up, and he said, "We found this man, Paul, a pestilent fellow, a ringleader of the sedition. He's stirring up riots." And Paul said, "They neither found me in the temple disputing with any man, neither stirring up the people, and neither can they prove what they're accusing me of."
Yeah.
So they were accusing Paul of this insurrection when they were the ones guilty of it.
And, Bill, they're calling this, and some said, well, this is a both sides issue. And Don Bongino was just on Fox here the other day, too, and addressed this matter about it being a both sides issue. Here's what he had to say.
And not only, Rachel, is there no shame, you're welcomed in open arms on mainstream left-wing podcasts where they're like, hey, come on in and spew this bile out there. There is no such corresponding movement on the right. There is no both sides, folks. Stop telling yourself that. It's not true. You would never be allowed on this network. You work here. I've worked here a long time. You would never be allowed on this network even joking around about that stuff. You'd be gone. They'd pull you off mid-segment. They don't allow that stuff. It's not a both sides thing. It is garbage.
He said it was garbage. It was the end of his statement there. And Bill, as we were saying, is that and President Trump has had some choice words, but it's not causing that which is for, calling for physical harm. And that becomes a major difference as well.
Yeah, I was reading about Saul Alinsky, and he was at his campus, and some students were going to protest George H.W. Bush, who was then ambassador to the United Nations, and he was going to be speaking on campus regarding the Vietnam War. And Saul Alinsky says, go dressed as KKK members, and whenever Bush says something that's, supporting the Vietnam agenda, stand up and wave the placards dressed in your KKK outfits and say, the KKK supports Bush.
Wow.
And he says, this is what they did, and it was very effective.
Wow.
So the idea is you want to accuse the other side of, in a creative way, for stuff that you're guilty of. And there's another Bible example of Elijah. He finally meets Ahab.
I tell you what, Bill, I'm going to put you on pause here because we're 5 seconds from the break, and so we're going to get right back to Elijah and Ahab, giving an example, friends, of this very aspect here, or that of projection. Bill Federer is with us today. Another assassination attempted this past Saturday. A little bit later, we'll be opening our phone lines to take your questions and or comments, so stay with us. Back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk.
For over 200 years, the American judicial system has upheld a standard so strong that a person's very life can be ended based on this level of confidence. A verdict supported by evidence that is beyond a reasonable doubt. Did you know there is evidence demonstrated beyond a reasonable doubt that we have a creator? Most are unaware of it because it has been censored from textbooks. Now, you can have this information at your fingertips. In the beautifully illustrated hardcover book, Have You Considered? Evidence Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, Bruce Malone and Julie Von Vet provide a series of unique devotions presenting evidence for every day of the year that points to the Creator. It's written in an easy-to-read format so that young and old can learn. Have You Considered is available for a donation of $18 or more from VCY. Call 1-800-729-9829.
Bill Federer with us here today, AmericanMinute.com, his website, AmericanMinute.com. Friends, tons of resources there and lots of historical information that you will benefit from, AmericanMinute.com. Bill, we were talking about projection here, and you were just ready to mention about Elijah, and that break was coming quickly, so tell us about that Elijah scenario, that also perhaps that false accusation coming in that story as well.
Yeah, so Ahab is the wicked king of Israel, and he's worshiping all these pagan gods, and God is judging with a famine. The rain is not coming, and finally Ahab meets Elijah. And the first words out of Ahab's mouth is that you, Elijah, you troubler of Israel? And then, of course, Elijah says, no, you're the troubler of Israel because you're sinning.
Mm-hmm.
But and Adam did it to God. He blame shifted. He's like, well, it's the woman you gave me that made me sin. So he's trying to make God take the blame for him being the one sinning. You had Nero set fire to Rome, and he blamed the Christians. And they even did it to Jesus. Here are these Pharisees, and their father's the devil, right? Jesus said, no, Abraham's our father. He goes, no, if Abraham loves you, accept me. But the Pharisees accused Jesus of being demon-possessed. He's casting out devils by the prince of devils. I mean, imagine that. Jesus himself being accused by these people who are sinners, accused of being demon-possessed. Yep. So this is a typical tactic where I wanted to read this. This is the Military Review. The article is a review of Soviet psychological warfare. It says, this is an example of the propaganda technique of name-calling. It is also what psychologists call projection. If you do something wrong, accuse the enemy of doing it before he accuses you. And the one who makes it first has the advantage because many people believe any charge they hear without investigation. He goes on, a person ascribes his motives to the opposition. We all heard children claim that he hit me first in order to escape blame for a fight. The Soviet Union behaved in this same childish way. So the Soviet Union would be aggressive into other nations. David Axelrod was Obama's campaign advisor. And on NPR radio, he said, in Chicago politics, there was an old tradition of throwing a brick through your own campaign office window and then calling a press conference to say you've been attacked.
Yep.
So in other words, you throw the brick at your own window, and then you said, it's these other people, they must have attacked me. And so the other side that didn't do it, now all of a sudden they have to go on the defensive, and they have to deny it. But every time they deny it, they're repeating the accusation, and that gets cemented in the public's mind. So it's
and we've seen,
tactic. Hillary Clinton, she did this uranium deal where she had kickback from a Russian uranium deal. The New York Times even reported that Hillary Clinton approved Russian uranium deal after a $2 million donation to her Clinton Foundation. So the Russian people donated money to the Clinton Foundation, and she approved this uranium deal. Clearly, she colluded with the Russians. So Hillary pays for a Steele dossier to accuse Trump of colluding with Russia.
Well, yeah.
The exact thing that she's guilty of, she pays to accuse Trump of.
Bill, another aspect of this whole matter I'd like to point out as well, and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer has led his party day after day after day to not fund the Department of Homeland Security, and that kicked in February 14th. We're talking 2.5 months now. This funding for DHS goes far beyond Customs and Border Patrol and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, but it also handles FEMA, these tornadoes and floodings that we've had go through the nation. It also handles CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. The U.S. Coast Guard gets their funding within Department of Homeland Security. We have also the TSA at the airports, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Centers, the Office of Intelligence and Analysis, the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office, and Bill, also included in DHS is the U.S. Secret Service. Day after day, week after week, now month after month, Chuck Schumer has led his party to be in opposition of funding DHS.
Wow. Well, yeah, this is very serious for the country. We have to realize that playing politics is one thing. Mm-hmm. George Washington warned in his farewell address of parties, and he said people will be willing to sacrifice their country to advance their party. And that's what we're seeing happening. Yeah. That certain people are willing to say, look, if we can, years ago I met George H.W. Bush. I was running for Congress, and I was running against Dick Gebhardt. Mm-hmm. And he said, I don't like Gebhardt. He, used other words. But he said, when I was president and our troops were on the ground in Iraq, Gebhardt was the main Democrat in Congress, and he refused to let the Democrats support funds for the troops on the ground until Bush agreed to raise taxes. And as soon as Bush said, okay, I'll let the taxes get raised, Gebhardt goes outside and has a press conference and said, Bush broke his promise. Remember, read my lips, no new taxes? Well, he just agreed to new taxes. Mm-hmm. And Bush claimed that is what cratered his reelection campaign. Yep. The media ran with it. But here's Gebhardt willing to use our troops on the field as a leverage. And so here today you have Democrats saying, okay, we're going to let our country be undefended and vulnerable because we want to make it hurt really bad. I was in Houston 2 weeks ago. I showed up at 3:50 in the morning for a flight, and I saw this sign that said 240-minute wait.
Wow.
At 3:50 a.m. in the morning, I called the people that dropped me off, and they took me to Hobby Field, and I was able to catch a different flight through a different city. But it's, but you read the Democrats like, no, we want it to hurt. We want it to hurt the country really bad, so then they'll pressure Trump, and then they'll, push our agenda. It's like to think that they would be willing to have the country be vulnerable for them to score some political points is something that is terrible.
Friends, I'd like to open our phone lines here. If you have a question or a brief comment, or number 800-733-9829, 1-800-733-9829. Bill, what do you believe should be our nation's takeaway from this? I mean, here we've seen multiple attempts now for the assassination of Donald Trump. We see the rhetoric that's been increasing. And yes, there have been Republicans who have been saying some pretty vile things as well. I'm going to admit that. But some of this is, the Kimmel comment here just the other day, what should be our nation's takeaway from what's going on at this time?
I like big picture thing. If there was no Trump, you'd probably have politicians caving to the globalist agenda. And they would be pushing this tracking everybody around the world. The Islamic agenda would be able to increase, the Ayatollah would certainly be there and wanting to set up the caliphate. America is holding back this globalist agenda. If there's one thing about Trump, he is not a globalist. They accuse him of being a nationalist. They accuse his support of being nationalist. Well, nationalist is sort of the opposite of globalist. Brock Chisholm was the first director of the World Health Organization, and he said, to achieve world government, we must necessarily remove from the minds of men their national patriotism. So globalists hate Make America Great Again. they don't want to make America great. They want to do this trilateral commission, this Council on Foreign Relations, where they want to have America not be great and have it. There's a quote from George Soros, and he says, the main obstacle to, the New World Order is the United States. And so here you have these globalists wanting, you think of it, who else could cough up $450 million for some bogus accusation or some lady that had some fantasy dream and having to pay $80 million? The pool of people that can run for president that has that kind of money is very limited. Yeah. And so, other than, I guess, Elon, but most of the globalist billionaires are on the left.
Yeah, yeah.
Zuckerberg, Soros, Bezos, and so forth. And so any other person running for president is going to need lots of money, and they're going to have to go to the people that have it and basically do a trade. Trump didn't have to do that. He is totally unique. Personally, my wife and I sort of chuckle when we read his tweets. But it's one thing that is clear. There is no handler censoring his tweets. You're hearing from him because any handler would have said, no, don't send that out. So in a sense, it's refreshing because you know exactly what he's thinking. He's not reading a teleprompter and having this cushioned, politically correct response. You're getting straight what he's thinking. And
we've got to get to our phone lines here. Let's get to our phone lines. Wayne in Gregory, South Dakota. Wayne, you're on the air.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I was just going to make a comment. You hear all these, even conservative reporters and everything, and like, where's this rhetoric coming from? Where's this hatred coming from and everything? It's Marxism. It's Marxist ideology. And so the American public at large understands that we've been under attack by this ideology that's taken over basically the Democrat Party just about completely. I don't think people are ever going to understand, that's the core of it. They're rid of this whole thing. And anyway, that's my comment. I just hope that more people wake up. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. And Bill, you've written a whole book virtually on this and socialism and that Marxist ideology, and that is something that is very much at play here, is it not?
Well, it is. They have what's called projection, blame shifting. There's a quote from Charlie Hurt, Fox News, May 23rd, 2019. He says, this whole thing is like the game of projection. Whatever they accuse President Trump of doing, we find out not only did President Trump not do it, but they did it. There is another quote from Elon Musk on October 7th, 2024, and he says, they deflect attention away from themselves. It's sort of like a preemptive moral strike. Those who are saying that Trump is a threat to democracy are themselves actually the threat to democracy. Quote from Nancy Pelosi, she called it the wrap-up smear.
Right.
He says, it's a diversionary tactic. You demonize your opponent, and then the wrap-up smear, you smear somebody with falsehoods, and then it's reported in the press.
Yeah. Let's get to Jim in North Dallas, Texas. You're on the air, Jim.
Oh, good evening, good afternoon, Jim. Hope you're having a good day. Yeah, I know what you're talking about right there is right on the nose, what I'm wanting to speak about. The news networks that we listen to and see around our country every day. There's CNN, the Communist News Network, CBS, the Communist Broadcast System, NBC, nobody cares, Fox News, a play on words, freedom of expression. That's all I got to say.
Okay.
Good luck.
Thank you, Jim, for your call. A quick break here, and we'll come back to more of your calls and comments afterwards. Bill Federer is with us today. AmericanMinute.com is his site, and yes, we're talking about another assassination attempted here this past weekend. We'll be back in 1 minute here on Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brennan House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. We need to get back to the Bible, particularly when it comes to the issue of evangelism and what it means to preach the gospel. Sadly, many people are being told today, well, you don't know if the person you're talking to is even ready to hear the gospel yet. How do you know they have been regenerated? They have to be regenerated before they can be saved. They have to be born again before they can be born again. You never see that taught in the Bible. Over and over the passages. Believe on the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and thou shalt be saved. It's over and over. Charles Spurgeon addressed this in 1863. Quote, if I am to preach faith in Christ to a man who is regenerated, then the man being regenerated is saved already. And it is unnecessary and ridiculous thing for me to preach Christ to him and bid him to believe in order to be saved when he is saved already being regenerate. End quote. Folks, don't be hindered. Preach the gospel. I'm Brennan House.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. William J. Fitterer, our guest today, and we're going right back to the phone lines. Rich is calling from Burlington. Hi, Rich, you're on the air.
Thank you so much for taking my call. I really appreciate hearing from Bill Fitterer again. I had jury duty a week or so ago, and we had to watch a video in which they said the person speaking said jury duty is an important part of saving our democracy. And the person who was speaking was the Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court in Wisconsin. And I thought, that's someone who should know we don't have a democracy. It's someone who knows we have a republic. And she wasn't being, someone could say she wasn't being careful with her words, but she was a Chief Justice. And she made this video.
Wow. Thank you, Rich, for bringing that up. And Bill, you and I have done a program before here on what is our system of government and we talked about the various differences in government and certainly we're a constitutional republic.
Right. Yeah. The confusion sort of got injected with Franklin Roosevelt and the Truman. So Truman's inaugural address, 1949, he goes through 6 points contrasting America with the communists. And he said, in a democracy, we believe in freedom of, religion, but in a communist state, we don't. And in a democracy, and so he uses this general definition of democracy as a popular form of government. But the caller's correct. As a functioning form of government, like in Athens, every citizen had to be present at every meeting. And if you weren't there and didn't know what they're talking about, you're called an idiotus. And democracies are subject to passions, sort of like a football game where they'll all get excited. And so Plato wrote about a battle that the Athenian navy won, but there was a storm and the admiral was not able to rescue everybody. And when he gets back, instead of thanking him, they get upset at him, and the people get stirred up into a frenzy, and they kill the admiral. And then afterwards, they feel bad about it. But it's too late. He's dead. And Socrates says, Plato says, this democracy is a mobocracy.
Right.
They can get So a republic is you take care of your family and your farm, and you have someone in your place that goes to the market every day. They're your representative. And since it's one step removed, the passions calm down because the representative has to travel to go to there, and by the time they do, they can talk with the other ones. But in America, we have a constitutional republic. So even the representatives can't do whatever they want. They're limited by the Constitution. And then the purpose of the Constitution is to guarantee to us our creator-given rights, as mentioned in the Declaration. All men are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. And the purpose of the government is to guarantee to us our creator-given rights. But all that together, we democratically elect our representatives, but the representatives are in a republic that's a constitutional republic with the purpose of guaranteeing to us our creator-given rights.
Let's go to Karen in Pennsylvania. Karen, you're on the air.
Yes, hi. Well, I was something back on Crosstalk that I've heard. It kind of falls in with this a little bit, I think. Correct me if I got it wrong. But when Germany wanted to invade Poland, the people of Germany really weren't with that. So they took some of their soldiers and dressed them up as Polish people, and they went around doing really horrible things, and so now the German people wanted them to go in and take over Poland, and it wasn't the Polish people that did it. They were deceived into it. But I don't think the Lord gives us a spirit of fear.
I agree.
And he wants us to pray. So we should pray for our leaders, pray that we aren't deceived ourselves. And but I thank you for your time.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. And again, yes, God has not given us a spirit of fear, of power and of love and of sound mind. And I'm just going to mention that we started a ministry here just a week or so ago about sending out a daily text of encouragement, a promise from Scripture to fear not. And all you have to do is put those words together, fear not, all one word, and text it to 414-930-7676. And each morning at 7 Central Time, you'll find a verse about fearing not and trusting the Lord. So again, text fear not to 414-930-7676. Maxine in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, you're on the air.
Yes, I just wanted to share. Friday, my grandson and I went to a conference in Wisconsin Dells on autism, and the guest or the main speaker was so left-wing. All he talked about was politics, and he really ran down our president and the MAGA movement, and he was trying to cause racial strife. And he was making fun of Trump's National Guard in Minnesota. He said it used to be the National Guard escorted black youth to the schools. Now the National Guard is rounding up aliens. He says we should defund the police, defund ICE. And this was at a family autism conference. It had nothing to do with our families. But again, that shows how the media can be used to mislead people.
Thank you, Maxine, for sharing that. And Bill, it's really about creating division and discord, isn't it?
Yeah, diabolical is where you get the word diabolos or devil, and it means to divide. And so imagine being in heaven and somebody sowing division. Well, it happened, Lucifer. And then he's cast out and he sows division in the garden with Adam blaming Eve and Cain killing Abel. And so this tactic of dividing is where they, during the Cold War, they would observe all the groups in a country, economic groups, racial groups, and they would call some victims and others oppressors, haves and have-nots, and then they would pit them against each other to cause riots and bloodshed, and then they would co-opt the media to blame the leader of the country for all of the problems. And when his popularity fell, they would do a coup or a rigged election and replace the leader with a Soviet puppet. And so these tactics have been perfected, the sowing of division. If you dig into it, the feminist movement was started for the purpose of sowing division between men and women, husbands and wives. The 60s teen rebellion movement was started during this Soviet psyops to split families. The Stalin himself picked the racial topic to split the country racially.
I tell you what, Bill, we're going to have to leave it there because our closing theme is airing. We're sorry to other callers on hold right now. But, Bill, thank you for carving out this hour and joining us here today. I understand you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area today.
Yes. But I was going to mention the anti-Zionist movement was started by the KGB in 1964 by Yuri Andropov.
Friends, thank you so much for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.